In this lesson, I'm going to encourage you to switch over from the meticulous manner of drawing taught in the first lesson over to a freehand drawing of simple geometric objects. Now, the difference between the previous lessons where I discussed 5-point perspectives and ways to construct very stringent guidelines, here we remove those guidelines and try to focus on freehand drawing any geometric volume, such as this cube, for instance, and you can use different kinds of corrective methods to check whether or not your geometric object is in line with the vanishing points that are invisible due to the fact that we are drawing these objects freehand. You can also construct your geometric objects plane after plane and essentially kind of building a box or a volume that is essentially covered with different kinds of facets. This is another technique of freehanding different kinds of geometric volumes. And again, play around with different kinds of angles, different kinds of ways you can flip these objects around. And as a start, try and stick to basic geometric shapes, simple ones, so that you can also simultaneously improve your hand-eye coordination, your line confidence. These things are important for future endeavors and future lessons, especially the ones that we will tackle. Now, I'm going to show you one more technique that I use when I'm freehand drawing any sort of subject through the example of a cube, yet again, and you can see what I'm doing right now. I am fuzzing out and lightly sort of shaping the edges and manipulating them at will so that I can adjust my proximity towards these geometric objects. In this particular case, I'm shifting these edges to bring the vanishing points closer to one another. And again, I'm using these corrective methods to then finally clarify the cube that I want to draw. So you can be a bit sketchy, you can be a little messy, so long as you understand and check and correct the clarity with which you're trying to illustrate different kinds of objects. You can use guides, you can use as many of these corrective lines and corrective methods to ensure that what you're drawing is precise. And the more you do this, at the very beginning, you'll make a lot of mistakes, but you will learn a lot faster when you leave yourself a little bit of room to correct your mistakes by not expecting to render perfectly shiny geometric objects. This is why having an eraser is very handy. Now, after doing all of this, you can go back and shift those objects around, try and find different viewing angles, but there is one thing that I want you to keep in mind. Try and keep your geometric objects transparent by continuing to draw different vanishing point guidelines like so. This is in order to make sure that the geometric integrity of your objects is whole and complete from all of the angles. There are some particular cases, especially when you're drawing more complex subject matters, where there are elements of it that are mirrored. For instance, like ears on a head that you have to keep in line with one another and make sure that they're not shifting up and down or left or right. And drawing subject matters transparently from imagination especially can help you ensure that you don't make those sorts of mistakes. And just as a quick demonstration, let me draw you a very simplified head shape with two spheres, dividing them in half with this sort of a silhouette. Now I'm going to connect the jaw lines, and with this ellipsoid that connects the eye line and the ears, I'm going to draw these crosses to connect one ear on the other side. So you can see how crucial the ability to see through objects can be, or rather, drawing your subject matter and your objects in a manner where they are transparent to make sure for you as an artist that you keep everything precisely in line. Now, let me move over to another part where I would like to show you how you can subdivide very simple and basic geometric volumes. And I'm going to start by drawing a square base, and I think I'm going to draw not only the two vanishing points, but also a third one above now to kind of accentuate the view from underneath this object. And this section, or rather this method, I'd like to call it a subdivision method. Now, I'm going to clarify a few lines here and there just to make this overall silhouette a little bit more clear and visible for you. And you can see I'm subdividing certain parts of this volume so that I can outline a chunk to be removed and for me to change the initial shape of this volume. This is an interesting mental exercise because oftentimes as artists, we have to perceive certain subject matters in our mind in advance and be able to manipulate them. So doing this on paper by removing corners, beveling different kinds of edges can actually help you improve that ability. And you can go as complex as you like and go as far as you like until you end up with a very intricate and interesting tool or some sort of an object that you can actually present as an architectural structure. The possibilities are endless with this kind of technique, but for now, you can stick to removing 5 or as much as 6 parts away from your initial volume. You can also try and shade your specific shapes and volumes to bring out the characteristic of your geometry, especially in the cases where there are certain surfaces that curve or deform in such a manner where there aren't really clear edges which you can define through line drawings. So shading can help you do that by introducing a little bit of light. And you can see this is why I am shading in certain areas for me to see my volume a little bit better. So you can give this a go by yourself, or you can follow along step by step with what I do on the screen. There's another technique I want to show you, which is geometric warping. And it's similar in how 4-point and 5-point perspectives, what you draw seems to bend and warp in time and space, but in reality it isn't. And through freehand drawing technique, you can also exaggerate that effect just by making sure that the corrective guidelines are making your precise geometric objects warp in accordance with all of the bendy guidelines that you're trying to introduce within your geometry. You can see I'm also utilizing the transparent way of drawing these geometric objects to make sure that I'm perceiving the volume as precisely as I can. And in addition to it, you can also continue your guides and add to your geometric composition by introducing more volumes and different kinds of shapes to see how much clearer you can envision this space and this particular kind of geometry. Technically, you can build out this scene as much as you'll like, and you can always check in with your guides to make sure that your composition is correct and sound. And again, try and do this with as many shapes as possible, with as many kind of viewing angles as possible. This, again, helps you to improve your intuition, your perception of volume, not only on paper, but within your mind. It is an interesting thing how an artist can see in advance these different kinds of shapes, geometries, lines, different kinds of subject matters without even having to draw them on paper. So, the more you do this, the more adept you will become at not only drawing these shapes, but also envisioning them inside your mind in a very clear manner. Now to cap it off, I'm going to introduce another exercise where you can practice all of the methods that I've shown you in this particular lesson by drawing a ground plane using these sorts of guides that I'm intuiting in terms of how they are bending in relation to one another to form a sensation of how they are connecting into two very distant vanishing points. So as I'm done, I'm going to start raising these planes in different kinds of manner to basically build out a geometric composition of building blocks of different kinds of shapes. There can be triangular, rectangular, cylindrical. Some might even bevel and change in their nature to form these sorts of more complex shapes. And with introduction of shading, I can also accentuate their volume. And I'm encouraging you to do this as a form of exercise, but also as a fun, sort of playful kind of way, building a imaginary sort of a town simplified on a very rudimentary level. You can see that I'm adding an archway over what seems to be a certain road going through triangular and cylindrical buildings. And again, you can see that I'm using corrective methods to make sure that I'm seeing these objects in a very clear manner on this particular plane. And you can see that I'm using corrective methods, again, just like in the previous examples, to make sure that these objects are in line with this ground plane. So do this as often as you can and play around with different kinds of silhouettes. And that's it for this particular lesson. Now, to quickly recap, we've done geometric drawings in space without using guides. The second one is where I've shown you how you can fuzzily draw edges to manipulate them to your will so that you can draw them more precisely. Then the third, where you make sure that you draw geometric objects transparently. The fourth is the subdivision method to practice your way of manipulating geometric objects. And 5, warping them in a manner where they are kind of distorting just to accentuate your exaggeration skills. And 6 is the geometric composition on a single ground plane. And you can go back and forth from this freehand type of drawing back to a very meticulous way of drawing perspective guidelines to make sure that you can be free but also very rigorous with your practice. So that's it for now.